All right, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar about permitting and safety and permits with the City of New Orleans. My name is Ashley Hillsman, and I'm the COO with the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce. And just some quick housekeeping information. Thank you all for registering and submitting questions and concerns in your registration. And we will try to get to as many of them as possible today. There were a lot, which we appreciate. And we also have a Q&A feature open. And if something comes to mind as it's being talked about that you want us to elaborate on, please add in your questions, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the next hour. And if time permits, we will get to as many of them as we can. And that's all I have for housekeeping. So now I will turn it over to Alice Glenn with New Orleans and Company.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. As Ashley said, I'm Alice Glenn. I'm the Executive Vice President here at New Orleans and Company. We are the official destination sales and marketing organization for the city of New Orleans. And one of the things that we have recently worked on and in partnership with the Chamber and many other organizations across the region is our Vision 2035 plan. The premise of which is that if we make New Orleans the best place it can be to live, to learn, to work, it will therefore be a great place to visit. And so, in that spirit, really understanding what some of the most pressing needs for businesses and individuals here in our community are, and not just needs, but also opportunities for improvement and partnership. We landed on safety and permits in this process that we all know has been a long-standing sore spot in the city and a barrier to doing business. So when Sandra Lindquist, the CEO of the Chamber, and I met recently with many members of the Moreno administration, but particularly with Susanna Kirby, who you're going to hear from very soon, we saw an opportunity both to introduce her to our community of members and stakeholders, but also give you the chance to hear directly from her in her planning and the ways in which her office is working to improve this, long-standing, troublesome process. So I won't belabor this introduction, but I do want to thank the Chamber for your partnership, and particularly the City of New Orleans and Susanna for this opportunity and to bring it to our members. So for those of you who don't know, Susanna Kirby is a seasoned finance and operations executive with more than 15 years of experience leading large-scale transformation across healthcare, higher education, public sector organizations. She's had roles, of course, within the city and the Sewage and Water Board, leading a large team, but also with Sodexo Live, Tulane, and the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. She's always been focused on operational efficiency, strengthening financial performance, and enhancing organizational accountability. Does that sound like what we need here in the city of New Orleans? I feel just really so enthusiastic and excited to now turn it over to Susanna and give you the floor. But thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Chamber and New Orleans and Company, for allowing me to come and share this vision that I want to create for not only the city of New Orleans, the administration, just everyone doing business within the city. I don't think I could have said it any better than Alice, with understanding the struggles that we know safety and permits has created for a long time, and that is a decades long problem that's not going to be fixed overnight. But the first step is recognizing what the challenges are and then addressing them as we can, one by one. So again, Susanna Kirby, I'm the Director of Safety and Permits. I started here in March of this year, so I've been here a little over 5 months. Have most of my experience in hospital finance operations, but almost all my 15 years has been around process improvement and working towards those efficiencies. So I just want to thank you all for being here today and taking time out of your day to listen to me. I definitely want to leave time to make this a conversation because the only way we're going to get better is to listen to the community and what the real problems are so we can focus on that. So with that, I will get started. So as the Department of Safety and Permits, our responsibility touches every corner of New Orleans. So from the homes we live in to the businesses we build to the events that bring our city to life. Our work is foundational to public safety, which always comes first, community trust, and the growth of our city. So over these last 5 months, I've taken a pretty hard look at ourselves, the challenges we face, the barriers we've created for our residents and professionals, and the ways our internal processes have shaped their experience. And I truly believe in the commitment. I truly believe in the vision of Mayor Moreno that we need to be all in for New Orleans. And that especially means improving the way we communicate, the way we serve, and the way we operate. So I'm here today. I'm going to share where we've been, where we are currently, and where we're going. So I want to be honest, and I want to show the focus on progress. So we're made up of, Safety and Permits is made up of various divisions. So we work collectively to ensure safety standards, which is always kind of, I say, our North Star, right? Safety. For all construction and building uses throughout our city. So our work touches nearly every aspect of development, from building, zoning, electrical, mechanical, and even up to special events. So over the past few months, I really wanted to focus on something bigger than operations. We need organizational-wide improvement. So some of the things I'll talk to on future slides is the interagency cooperation and level of communication that we have to work towards as well. So there's various departments within the city that can touch permits, and we haven't always been the best of streamlining that process. So that's what I mean when I say organizational wide. These improvements are aimed at enhancing customer service, which quite frankly has not existed in safety and permits for a long time, and rebuilding public trust. So two areas we know that are essential for both external stakeholders and our internal teams. So a clear division of our structure within safety and permits is the building division, trade licenses, zoning, special events. Those are kind of our main things. There are things that fall outside of us with the Department of Public Works, who has their own permitting processes, HDLC, which is the Historic District Landmark Commission, and the Vieux Carré Commission, along with the Bureau of Revenue and several others. So again, collaboration is going to be the key for quality and consistency in permitting and compliance. So to do that, we really needed to focus, I needed to focus on the past and then the future for safety and permits. So before we even talk about improvements, we have to acknowledge where we started. So the past challenges in safety and permits, they date back, like I said earlier, years, and many are longstanding. However, identifying these issues honestly has allowed us to set clear priorities and begin implementing real change. So if we look at this side-by-side comparison, number one on the list is timely permit issuance. And when we think about that, we have to think that's not just approving the permit for someone to begin work. We have to think about the entire chain of events. So it's all the way through that zoning verification to issuing the permit to now you're done with the work and you have to have inspections, and we have to get meters released and certificate of occupancies. You know, that it can be clunky and it can be, as to the second bullet, not transparent for the community. And again, we're going to talk further down about how we're changing that with new communication strategies, public dashboards, and I'll show a couple examples. The other piece is internal and external education. You know, again, we haven't done a great job of getting out to the community and explaining the changes we're making, explaining the resources that we have or we don't have. I mean, I think it's no secret to anyone in this group that, or across the city, that the city is experiencing a budget crunch right now. And so we have to work smart with the resources we have and make sure we're allocating them appropriately. And that's my job to do with safety and permits. Where are the real struggles? Where can we shift resources to refine the process? The next thing I wanted to share, and these are some of the concerns I heard not only from you all, but as I've met with other developers, applicants, groups and neighborhood meetings, is, again, I won't read the whole list, but, zoning is always a big one. How do we get more information out there? Apologies, about what's allowed, what's not allowed. We have lots of different districts and overlays within the city. And, how can we be clearer? How can we be more efficient in what's allowed within those zones? The slowness, the delays, again, how can we work towards a tracker so that applicants, developers can know exactly where their project is? How do you know when you even have to apply for a permit? And how do you know what type of permit to apply for? All these, so we've developed job aids. Those are some of the things we're doing that should be on the website soon to make it easy. So you're not having to click 20 different times to figure out where you're going. So these are some of the core issues. And again, we hear lots of things about resources and staff. And, it seems like you're, sorry, my light is on a timer. Understaffed, and where do you need more resources? Learning about the permitting processes, timing for events. What's allowed when those events are going on. So those are some of the top challenges that I've heard, and I know there's several others, but those are some of the big ones. So if we go to the next slide. The Chamber in New Orleans and Company were nice enough to gather questions directly from you. So for me, that's a valuable source of real world concerns, right? These questions shape our priorities, directly influence our communication strategy, help us know what job aids we should be creating, looking at standard operating procedures. What I see here is we in the city, we have a lot of red tape. And one thing I've talked to council about, the mayor about, the CAO is where can we cut that red tape? Is some of it self-inflicted, right, that we've done within the department? And we have found that, right? We found it with electrical vacancies, for example. We were requiring people to apply for a permit if the property had been vacant for more than 2 years. Well, you shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't require that. That's burdensome. Making people have to come inside in person. Everything, there should be choices for people. Everything should be online. We have One Stop, which is the public facing portal for permits, but unfortunately not everything is on there right now. It's a real push to get that way. It will happen. We have moved recently trade licenses to online, for example. So those are some of the improvements we've made. So I wanted to get to some of the questions because, again, these came directly from you all, and I want to make sure we actually stop on this slide and take some time to really cover it. The one thing I thought was interesting, because this is a new progress update, was about digital signatures for contracts. Well, interesting enough, we are beginning to implement DocuSign for contracts that go through legal. For other contracts, we're expanding that access. It's not throughout the entire city yet, but we have begun that process. So you should see those changes very soon. Can license renewal be simplified? I think certain ones can be. I think that speaks to our internal process. Now, we are bound by state regulations, city ordinances that we always have to follow. But definitely, one of the first ones process we started looking at is special events. Special events is a tricky one. It is very dependent on the type of event and what's required. And so there are lots of questions around that. And what I have listed some of our websites because, to get some good information. Renovation permit process and timeline. There's thresholds that's listed on our website. It's really going to depend on the extensiveness of the renovation. Is it a substantial, which substantial renovation is going to mean over 50% of the appraised value? That's probably going to take a little bit longer than just a simple renovation. All those things have to be taken into consideration. We talked a little bit about making the process fully online. Healthy Homes complaint process. So Healthy Homes is an initiative that really geared up a couple years ago, and that is for rentals. And there's lots of questions. So there are standards that landlords have to meet for rentals. There are inspections that take place and have to occur. And so one thing, I think it's important because we do get violations and we can get them through various avenues. Healthy Homes and really any violation can go to 311. We also we have a website called zoning violations. So for example, if you think there's a house that should just be a residential house and they have an active business going in there, you can email zoning violations. We will send an inspector out. Same thing with building. If someone says they're building a 2-bedroom house and you see that they're actually building a 5-bedroom house, you need to email us at inspections.nola.gov, and we will send a building inspector out there to take a look. For Healthy Homes specifically, and again, I'm happy to have these slides shared with the group, but I've put the website on there specifically for Healthy Homes if there are specific complaints that need to be done. Understanding the difference between HDLC and safety and permits, I think this is a really good one because, again, I spoke to it earlier. Safety and permits, it's one reason why I start my presentations with understanding what safety and permits role actually is and what we permit within our division, because you do have things, HDLC and VCC specifically, that within their districts or their designations have their own commission, have their own set of regulations. Mainly the two of them are anything exterior. So if we think about railing, paint colors within the French Quarter, windows, doors, they hold those regulations. Another interesting thing, because I've seen disconnect on this, they issue what's called a certificate of appropriateness. This is not the certificate of occupancy. So the certificate of appropriateness from HDLC and VCC means you're clear for your exterior work, right? So they approve your paint color, they approve your railing, etc. It does not mean that the inside of the building, if you're doing a renovation, is clear for occupancy. So I do like to, I think, again, that's a great question because there can be a disconnect if you get the appropriateness thinking that you can occupy. How will permitting become more predictable? Well, again, great question, because that's something we're working on right now through a program called PermitStat, and I'm going to share that in the next couple of slides. We are also very, very close to coming up with a public-facing dashboard that's even a little bit more detailed, better information than One Stop, where you can currently go in and search permits. The utility permit 30-day turnaround, that to me, that's more going to be public works, not necessarily safety and permits. It's also parks and parkways is a lot of times included in that. And I know Public Works has created an infrastructure coordination council. So that's all of the utility groups, different agencies, Entergy, and they meet weekly to discuss these utility permits and how to improve them. And so I know they are making significant progress on that. And there is some public facing dashboards that are coming with that as well. So those were kind of some of the common theme questions. Again, if there are more, I know happy to cover them when I'm done with this presentation as we can, or even answer them afterwards if we're unable to get to them. So across on the next slide, across the last several months, we've launched several new internal processes designed to create immediate impact. So one of the things I talked about is PermitStat. And so that's one of those collaborative efforts with what we call the Office of Performance and Accountability. It's an arm of IT, and they are data-driven. They can pull information and help us do process mapping, set up baseline metrics. And so we can really drill down on where the bottlenecks are. So if we think about, for example, plan review is a good one. It's a pretty extensive process. It can take a lot of time. So how can we use technology? How can we use the data to streamline that process? So that's what they've really been able to help us do. We've focused, we've started on with a small scope of residential permits and some licenses to find out where we're at now. So for example, a little over a year ago for permit approvals, it was taking over 40 days. As of now, just for residential permits, we are down to a median of 14 days. So we have made some progress in that, but then we've also had some staffing issues, have lost some staff. And so week over week, again, we see, where we need to shift those resources. So that's what PermitStat has been able to do for us. Another thing that came from PermitStat to help us be more transparent and understand our concern is something that I call Spark, named Spark. So on the next slide, to me, I'm sorry, I did miss something. This is an example of what we've done from PermitStat too. So we are doing weekly reporting. So within safety and permits, I have 11 units, if you will. Each unit now is providing weekly reporting. And so when I think about weekly reporting, I can use the data to say, oh gosh, I see a problem here. How are we going to address it? What's the problem? So if we look at this specific one and we look at the middle under licenses, I'm questioning why last week or whatever, the week you reported, I only see 2 were reviewed, but I have over 550 that are pending. That's an issue, right? That's a red flag to me. So I need that manager to come up with a plan of action and tell me what resources they need to bring that number down. Or maybe it's just, something in the data that we need to drill down into more to better understand where that is and how we can follow up. So if we think about each unit submitting this, and now we're doing it weekly, the method behind that is that you catch those numbers before they even increase to something like a 500 number, right? So I say this again in the effort to be transparent that, to appreciate that there is a backlog, and we are using this reporting to know where those backlogs are and come up with individualized plans to knock it down. So on the next slide, we look at Spark. And so this is one of the biggest moves I've made since I started. What I realized is because, just in all honesty, there's a frustration, right? Applicants, developers, business owners call, and Safety and Permits doesn't answer the phone, right? We drop over 20% of our calls, which means we don't answer them. Emails, just as bad. We aren't responding to emails. And so at a certain point, understandably so, people say, well, where else can I go? And they reach out to their city council person. And the city council person, and their staff will reach out to me and say, hey, what's going on? We need answers. We need statuses. So I developed Spark, and that stands for Safety and Permits Assistance in Response to Council. So this platform, it allows council to view data that historically lived behind internal systems and just wasn't being provided. I don't think honestly was even being looked at. So we're working again with IT departments. I want to make this eventually public as well. And then, really the goal is that applicants should never have to escalate to the point of going to city council, right? We should be handling that. And I will tell you some of the moves I'm making is looking at standing up a call center. And so these will be people dedicated all day. It'll be their job to answer the phone and be able to answer at least most questions that people may have regarding their permits. As it stands right now, that does not exist within safety and permits, which is one of the challenges. So that's one thing we're working towards. We have budget hearings coming up soon, and so definitely some requests are being made to get us there for the responsiveness. But what you'll see on this slide is really, by district, how many concerns, questions came in, what type of question. And I know it's small, but, we get various. It ranges from, concerned neighbors about, activity that's happening in the neighborhood, whether it's illegal short-term rentals, potential illegal businesses, buildings that are being built out of scope. And so what you can see on here is just the full scope of what we see in a given month. I think this was July. And then we prioritize them. As I say multiple times, safety is our number one. And so those are always going to get ranked as the highest priority. And then we drill down, is this a place that has had numerous complaints, numerous violations? Does it need to be escalated? All those things are factored in when it comes to reviewing this dashboard that goes out monthly to city council, but we are, again, reviewing it weekly to ensure that things are getting followed up on, things are getting closed, and that we are responsive to the person who has reached out with the inquiry. So in closing, as we move forward, the mission remains clear. We want to ensure safety. We want to strengthen and build customer service, quite frankly, and rebuild public trust through consistent, transparent, and accountable work. We know the challenges are real, and I feel like we're taking real steps towards solving them. Again, this did not happen overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight, but we do need to show progress through and transparency. The improvements we're implementing today, they're structural changes designed to last. So from new communication practices to expanded training, streamlined workflows, transparent public dashboards, I want to build a department that matches the resilience and vibrancy of the city of New Orleans. So I want to thank you for your time. Leave time for conversation. Know that I appreciate the partnership and the commitment to helping us improve. I want the experience for every resident, business owner, and applicant who interacts with safety and permits to be a positive one. Is that going to be possible every time? No. But if I can say that we have been responsive and we have tried to address the concern and at least provide the tools and the communication, then I will know that we are working towards the good goal. So together we're creating a safer, stronger, and more responsive New Orleans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susanna. That was great to hear all the updates that y'all are having and that y'all are implementing. And we're definitely looking forward to a better experience when it comes to safety and permits. And we have a handful of questions that we can address because we have some time. There's two kind of about this. One stop, I think, yeah, I guess there is one person that can, or one email within a profile for a company. And is there a way to add another person, whether somebody leaves and their email's tied to that account? Is there a way to add people to a company profile?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So for one applicant, the applicant can list multiple contacts, um, but the applicant, as it stands right now, is linked to one email. So but there can be multiple contacts. So you can have agents or um, there's multiple drop down choices of people you can list that can all get the notifications when we send our notification of what may be required, what's needed. But as it stands right now, yes, the applicant would be tied to one email address. So my suggestion would just be to add others as agents or points of contacts with their emails as well.
Fantastic. Good to know, because I did not do that. But then going another direction, um, where would you go, or what's the appropriate process for applying for a taxi shared vehicle designation or lane on a city street?
Yeah, so I would direct you. So that's one I didn't bring up. So thank you. That would have been good to put in my presentation. So that's actually Ground Transportation Bureau. So that's yet another department. And it is really being looked at high levels of how we streamline these different departments. So I would, and I'm happy to get the email address and the link for this person specifically and send it to them. But they would go through the process through Ground Transportation Bureau.
There was another question about this as well. Timeline of posting on One Stop. There have been some delays for documents to be posted as evidence from the dates on the zoning letters and when they're available to view. Is there a reason for delay, I guess?
So there's a couple of different things. I'm not sure if they're referring to violations or verifications. I'll speak to the zoning verifications first, and I will admit there is a delay. We have, I think last time I looked, over close to 100 zoning verification requests in our system, and right now I really have 2 people that are trained up to review those and make determinations. So that would be that delay, and just all honesty. They're trying to get them out within a few weeks, but that's just unfortunately not always the case. When it comes to violations, that's a little bit different. So zoning violations, the letter is typically posted and should be public, within days of the violation being found. Now, if we talk about it going through the entire life cycle of a violation all the way to adjudication, then we talk about it going to the Central Adjudication Bureau and having a hearing. And that's a little bit separate process. It kind of leaves safety and permits at that point and goes to the Central Adjudication Bureau where there's a hearing and a judgment that's then filed. And that can take time just based on scheduling for the hearing and all of that. So,
all right. Y'all are busy typing over there. Can you start an insurance compliance partnership team for a COI review and verification, vendor compliance tracking, and risk gap identification for additional insured wording, etc.?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So a couple of things on that. So when we require liability insurance for people, that have to submit for things like trade licenses and certain types of businesses. When it talks about the compliance of that, I think that's an interesting concept. It is not something we currently, go out and actively investigate, but I definitely think that's a very valid suggestion and definitely one I'll take.
Great. If I want to provide permit expediting services for contractors and developers in New Orleans, what do I need to do to properly represent clients and submit and manage their permit applications through One Stop?
Yeah, I think this is where the job aids are going to help too, and the checklist, right? What we see a lot, and I would tell you from safety and permits, it's something that drives me crazy, is when we send comments to an applicant and they submit the documents, and then a different department sends more comments, right? And so the applicant's like, I thought I was done. I sent the documents. Why can't you send it to me all at once? So I would say I think for the most part, agents, consultants, people that are helping applicants are doing a great job. I think safety and permits, we need to do a better job about streamlining what's required. But the best way, we do have a pretty extensive list on our website. If you submit all the documents and they're complete, that's going to be the quickest way to get your permit through.
Which that brings me to a question I had. Can you elaborate by what you mean by job aids and what that means to you and your team?
Yeah, and I should have put, I could put some examples out there. It's how to have the complete package. And so the website, I will say, is pretty good, but it's overloaded with a ton of information. I have a short attention span, right? And so I need one page, right? Give me one page that tells me everything I need to have. I want a checklist. And know that when I have that checklist, you're not coming back to me for any more information. And so what we've started with is residential renovations, roofing. Oh gosh, I think we did swimming pools and one more, and gas. And what it is exactly that. It's maybe job aid isn't the right word, but I say job aid checklist. It's a one pager that's literally everything you need to turn in. If you need more details and definitions, it refers you to the link in the website. But once you check that off, you're submitting a complete package for your permit. And we're just going to expand that. We started with, honestly, some of the simpler ones, if you will, and then working towards expanding that to all the other permit types. So that will be on the website soon.
Okay. Have there been any changes to bus permits, for example, like processing access, drop-off, pickup locations for tour groups?
Yeah. So, and I hate pushing this off too, but again, that's going to be Ground Transportation Bureau. They permit taxi cabs, like the carriages, Lyft, Uber, buses, tour guides, all of those things.
Does safety and permits oversee meter permits, or is that Public Works?
That's Public Works.
Okay. Because that would be in the special events world when clients want to buy out a street parking event.
Yeah, so for special events, depending on what you say you're going to do, it's going to trigger different events and reviews, right? So if you're going to do a second line, for example, and need streets closed, that's going to trigger not only Department of Public Works, but also the police department, right? And they're going to come up with a security plan, how many officers are needed. DPW is going to, see if they can actually barricade the streets off. And then if you are going to have vending, for example, that's going to trigger Department of Revenue because they'll need those licenses. And then it will trigger oftentimes zoning, is that event allowed to happen in that area? So depending again on the meters, if that's the request, that those would be the departments that would be reviewing that.
Recently, One Stop started requiring a construction contract to be submitted at the time the application is filed for a building permit. this often is not available as the permit applications are filed at the same time projects are being bid. Is there a way to revert back to allowing construction contracts being submitted at any time before the permit is approved?
Yeah, that's a question I've been asked a lot, and I'm definitely open to that. I think, well, I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. The permit, you can apply for the permit at any time. The approval will happen once everything's complete. Now, if the question is specifically, can I approve a permit without a signed contract? I'm happy to have that conversation. I think, we try to look at things from a practical perspective. And so if there are specific examples,
Yeah, I
always,
think it was more just like it's requiring a construction contract to be submitted when the application is filed.
yeah, it should just be a comment back before the permit gets approved that at some point it has to be signed. If they're running into issues where it won't let them submit it at all, I would need to know about that because that should not occur.
Um, the Can you explain when a zoning variance is required versus a zone verification? It seems developers prefer the latter, but because it doesn't require public input.
Right. So a zoning verification, anyone can ask for a zoning verification at any time, right? One of the reasons why we have so many right now. That is just zoning verification is just saying, is this allowed or is this not allowed? Based on location. So that's all a zoning verification. So yes, lots of times developers, contractors will ask for that to make sure that, if there's so a good one is like multifamily, right? So a 4-bedroom may be allowed, but a 5-bedroom isn't, for something like that. And so what they may go back and say is, okay, look, we can't, if we do a 5-bedroom, we're going to have to go through the entire appeal process, Board of Zoning Appeals, get a variance, may even have to go to City Council and get spot zone ordinances or things like that, which can take really 8 months, a year. It can take a long time. So a lot of times what people will do is ask for the zoning verification, because if there's adjustments they can make in the plans to fit within the zoning ordinance, sometimes that is an easier, better, more cost-effective option than going to get the variance, which can be costly and time consuming.
How are you thinking about leveraging technology and AI to help solve some of the safety and permit challenges that were listed?
Yeah, so some of there are lots of programs out there right now, specifically, I talked a little bit about in my presentation, plan review. So there are lots of tools out there that can do an initial plan review sweep, if you will, right? And what it does is there's a library, and I've met with several companies at this point that has the entire ICC, which is the International Building Code, and the CZO, or the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, and it checks the plans against all of that. And it doesn't, you still need your person, right? Because the person still needs to make sure nothing weird is going on, but it can do that, and it can send out flags for what may be missing. But it can cut down the time by over half, sometimes 75%. All of these, of course, cost money. And so that's what kind of in the phase we're at right now is gathering, really the ROI on it, right? Is it worth the cost versus the reward that we would get from it? Also, there's things like voice agents. There's even things on the permit intake side, right? Which almost to the signed contract, right? Maybe not that, but you have these requirements. Susie Q submitted her packet, but it's missing something. She didn't upload the insurance, for example, or the cost estimate. And so it automatically shoots her back a message. It doesn't have to wait for a person to review. We've definitely looked into that. We've had lots of conversations. We're in the process now, again, of seeing what's feasible for the city to do. But yes, I think, you can't have a modern permitting process without using technology, and I think eventually AI.
How is your office planning to enforce the energy code during inspections?
Yeah, so new code is coming as of January 1st. I, I think, we're always going to follow the code. So, I know people are getting permits in now. That would be, yeah, I mean, we'll go by what the code is.
Do I need a licensed contractor to pull a building permit, or can I pull it myself even if the property is in an LLC for new construction?
So for any construction that's going to happen, renovations, things like that, you do need a licensed contractor. Now, yeah, if you're talking about submitting.
So a little bit, there's been some comments that have relayed back to Ground Transportation Bureau. So is that a separate?
It's a completely separate
office?
division. Yeah.
And then if so, like, is there a separate contact? Are they still under One Stop? What would be a good follow-up to some of these? There's a handful.
Yeah, I think if I can give you their direct information, I I do think, and I don't want to say this with 100% certainty, I'm think they may be one of the departments that's not currently on One Stop, along with Department of Revenue. Again, something we're working towards, but happy to provide their direct information to you after this to
Okay.
send.
Yeah, we'll include that in our follow-up to everyone. In booking outdoor events with music, many clients book 1 or 2 years out. How far out can we submit the event permit application? Because that there's a challenge when you book a client for an event, and how can we be certain that the event permit would be approved close
Yeah.
to that date? What would be your suggestion?
So I always, I mean, I'm an early bird person too. So I'm like, when submit, there's no harm in submitting. And I don't even want to say challenge, but the reality of it typically centers around the secondary employment, so security detail. And quite honestly, they don't usually know until the week of an event if they're able to get security detail, right? So this is typically police officers, sheriffs that are saying that they are available to do the event and work it. And just what we have found is that secondary employment doesn't have that information until the week of an event. So I know it's been a real challenge, and it's something we're working on with them. But so to answer the question, you can definitely submit whenever you would like to, but the reality is that usually it's within the 2 weeks of the event that those permits are getting approved, just based on those events.
Gotcha. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Applying for a permit to to renovate my own home, regardless of the cost. It's just when you're applying for a permit, how would you go about that when you have to have a permit for over 50%?
Well, so, and again, I'll provide this information too, because it's really good. It's just like a list of 15 things that do and don't require permits. If you're just, I don't know, painting the inside of your house and painting your cabinets and maybe replacing some cabinet doors or something like that, you don't need a permit. Now, if you're tearing out the entire kitchen, that's, it's less than 50% substantial renovation, but it is still renovation that would require a licensed contractor. So it's, yeah, typically all those would need permits. So anything that's like tearing out structures, regardless of the percent. So we're the 50%, and I want to address this, the 50% substantial renovation.
Mm-hmm.
What that does is it again, I talk about triggering events. It's going to trigger things like floodplain and things like that. So that's why that's important.
How are third-party inspectors approved and confirmed? I had a commercial construction project and discovered the contractor had people doing electrical and plumbing work without a license or permit. Then had a third-party inspector approve the work after they completed, and we had to redo all the work and pay for it ourselves.
Wow. That's a
That may be a
horrible situation.
specific follow-up.
Yeah,
Get you
that is a
guys.
very specific. I would love to have that information because it's definitely not okay. All of our third-party inspectors are very well aware of the requirements. They do have to be certified. They are aware of this. They go through our trade license, our licensing process. They have to have their state license, again, insurance. And the same thing with the trades, right? So those electrical, mechanical, they all have to have their licenses and are aware of that. So definitely that would be something I would want to know immediately. We meet with the third-party inspectors quarterly and give them training and updates on what's required to do work within the city. So there really should be no question.
We got time for maybe one or two more. What is your plan to help coordinate across the different departments when it comes to having to wrangle the Sewage and Water Board for a plumbing riser diagram review and then connect with the permit? How would any of your implementations help towards alleviating some of that?
Yeah, I think they've started it. I think the idea is these more of these joint agency meetings where we are holding ourselves accountable. I think ICC is a good example of that, the infrastructure one that started. My plan is to do that with safety and permits as well. And so, and I also think the call center will be a good point, central point for this, right? Because my expectation is you call, you have a question about a riser diagram, for example, not being approved. And where is it at? The expectation is that my call center person should be able to email Sewage and Water Board and they respond within 24 hours. If they don't, I'm holding them accountable for that. The same thing within my divisions and across the works. And I think that's, it just has to be a coordinated effort among leadership of the different agencies to be on that page. And again, I think ICC is a good model for that, where we sit in the room every week and say these things to each other.
I agree. I think the ICC is one of the best things that has come out of had the administration.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a couple more specific things in here, but I think there will be a lot that will be handled in your follow-ups that Susanna is going to send us, like that one pager or the what to apply for a permit for.
Mhm.
And we will get those over to you along with the recording of this webinar. So you can come back and reference this at any point. So thank you all for joining us today. We will get this follow-up over to you within 24 hours. And thank you, Susanna, for joining us today.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.